Wow, these introductions are getting better and better. I really enjoyed that one. And I want to welcome you once again to the Garden of Eden. Now, transport yourself in your imagination to that place. Now, it has been a place that has been written about a great deal in literature. And so many people have tried to envision what that place was like. And so today we continue our family series called what? Roots, okay? And the theme for today is no surprise. Maternal roots. Maternal roots. And we're going to be talking about Eve, the mother of all the living. So what's the name of the mother of all the living? Eve. And today we want to speak to the women in our church and those that are watching us online. Ladies, this message is for you. And we want to share with you a word of encouragement from the Lord for the amazing job that you are doing as moms and as the carers and nurturers of our families. And so this job, as you well know, is very easy, right? Let me tell you, I would never want, I don't think I could do it, the job of being a mother. I don't think I could do it at all because of all the pressures of motherhood. And so today, our goal is to have everyone recognize the importance of the maternal roots at home. So let's give a hand for our moms, right? And I think they deserve much more than that because the mother is the center of the home and family life. And ideally, it is the father's role to provide for the family, to give security and take care of protecting the mother and the children. But that's another sermon for another day. It is the mother's role to bring support to the leader of the home. You know the saying, you've heard it before, behind every great man, there is a great woman. And that is exactly the case. And so my wife likes to explain it this way, and it keeps me rooted, okay? She says that I am the head of the household, but she is the neck. And so it's very difficult for the head to pretty much do anything unless the neck is willing to go along with it and be in accord. So one can say that the maternal roots provide stability and support for the family. And I want you to get a good look of the tree. Now, this is an image, and I want you to keep that image in your mind because in Eden, the trees become very important. You have the tree of life. You have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And you have all these other trees. And so it was a garden that was surrounded by beautiful trees. And I want you to look at the roots because different people in the family play different roles. And today we're going to talk about the roots which the mother has in the home, in the household. And so as such, it is of great importance that the maternal roots be grounded where? In God. And this was God's plan from the very beginning. In fact, let us remember our first mother. And what was her name? To see how important it is for mothers to be grounded in God. Now, the name Eve comes from the Hebrew word kava or chava, okay? It's hard to pronounce. Chava. And it's a play on words of the verb of the living, okay? And so Adam, as we read in the passage, says that, he looks at this woman and he calls her Chava, Eve, the living one, the one who brings forth life. And so she is the mother of all the living. And we have to remember this because we forget. We forget. When was the last time you heard a sermon about Eve? And so we forget that Eve was the first woman. She was the first wife. She was the first mother to give birth. That was a surprise for her. She was also the first mother of a murderer. How would you like to see your son be a murderer and be evicted? She was also the mother of the first martyr. How would you feel if your son got killed by his brother? She was the first person to be seduced. No, that's not a call to fame. She was the first person who sinned. Wow. She was the first victim of disappointment. Eve was the first dreamer crushed. Eve was also the first human to obey Satan. No, I wouldn't put that on my resume, but she was the first excuse of man. When God looks at the man and says, "What have you done?" He says, "The woman." We're still doing that, huh? She was the first woman to be conned by a snake selling lies. She was the first woman to experience depression, huh? She was the first woman to wear a fur coat. Now, how many of you still haven't done that? But she was the only woman. Now, I hadn't thought about this, so follow me when I say that she was the first and only woman to talk to God the Father face to face and lived. She got to see more than Moses. She got to see more than Elijah. She got to see the Father face to face and lived. Can you believe that? Now, if Adam lived, like the Bible tells us, 930 years old, then Eve, now this is, I've been looking up in Jewish legend, lived to be 6 years older. Women always outlive men. That's statistical. So she lived to be 936 years old. And she was there to bury Adam. Now, the Bible doesn't say that, and we don't have any historical proof of that, but I can imagine that happening. I can imagine this poor woman having to put up with Adam for 930 years. And according to this same Jewish legend, she not only outlived Adam, but even according to the historian Josephus, and we don't really know how much truth he had on that, but he noted that they had Cain, Abel, Seth, and we know of those three kids because they're in the Bible, and it says that they had, in the Bible, it says that they had other children, okay, other sons and daughters. Now, according to legend, now figure this one out, Eve had 33 other boys and 23 other girls. Can you believe that? I'm wondering how many of those were twins, huh? And so this woman, Eve, she deserves a statue. Now, the irony of it is that there's not too many statues of Eve. Actually, I went looking up on the internet. There's very few statues of Eve. And so Eve is practically unmentioned. Eve is brushed aside and forgotten in the biblical story. In fact, in the whole rest of the Bible, her name only appears twice and not in a very good light. So what does it matter? Okay, well, Eve was definitely a woman of more experience than all of the women in history. Her story deserves to be studied and shared. And so, what does it matter to us what happened to Eve thousands of years ago? Well, the fact is that some things have not changed at all in all that time. Motherhood is still at the heart of the home. And women today may not be named Eve. How many of you are called Eve? Okay, none, right? So I can talk about it, huh? But they all carried the burden she carried and then some, okay? Women still have 50% of the shares in all marriages, right? But some single moms carry all the weight of their families on their shoulders. And sadly, like Eve, many women today carry 100% of the blame, 100% of the guilt, 100% of the shame for failed homes, failed marriages, failed children, and failed lives. Now, that is a lot of guilt and shame to carry. No surprise that depression is the #1 mental illness among women. much collateral damage and suffering has been masked by the usual pains that are associated with womanhood. So what can we learn from Eve, the mother of all the living, about maternal roots? What can we learn from the first woman that beheld the Garden of Eden, that spoke with God, that failed, and then rebounded? First, Eve had to deal with the roots of guilt. Now, I've been around this world enough to know that women are guilty. I don't know of what, but they think they're guilty of something because they have these feelings. And I'm wondering, if this come all the way down from Eve. But in reality, we all share those feelings of guilt. Women just make it more transparent because disobedience is the mother of guilt. We've all been disobedient. But Eve, in particular, she wanted much more than she had, okay? How many girls out there feel like that? That you want everything. You want it all. Well, she wanted much more than she had, and she got much worse than she could imagine. Think about this. She's in this beautiful garden, and so she gets to hear the serpent. Now, we don't know what the serpent looked like, but she was very beguiling. So the serpent comes and says, hey, did God really say you can't eat from the trees? And she goes, no, that's not exactly what he said. And so he said that if we eat from this tree in the middle and we take the little fruit, that we're going to die. And then the serpent says, no way, you're not going to die. In fact, God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. I think I would have taken the fruit right then and there. And Eve was beguiled by the serpent because she saw that the tree was really beautiful. The fruit looked really tasty and it was delightful to look at, and it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. Now, I don't know about you, but don't you, at least wait till you get married, guys. What happens when you get married is that you always marry a woman that knows everything. I don't know how that works. I don't know how the mechanism happens, but there's something in women that they want to know everything. And so it's scary, right? But it goes all the way back to Eve. It goes all the way back to Eve. She was tempted by that. She wanted to know, okay, now just so that you get it, when we talk about the tree of the knowledge or the science of good and evil, what is good and evil? Okay, it's another way of saying everything. So it was the tree of the knowledge of everything. I mean, if you eat from this thing, you're going to know everything. And so what happened was that she ate, and because of that, she was the first human to disobey God. Now look at verse 13. It says, so the Lord asked the woman, what is this you have done? What is this you have done? This is God, the Father, the Creator, the one who had just created the whole universe, talking to a woman face to face and saying, girl, what'd you do? And what did she say? It was the serpent. It was the serpent. He deceived me and I ate. And at that moment, guilt fell on her like a ton of rocks. How much guilt can a woman face? How much guilt can a woman face? I mean, this was major, okay? She disobeyed the Creator God. And yet, okay, but God, what did God do? God disciplined her. I mean, she was disciplined, but he also forgave her. God gave Eve. And in that very moment, he gave humanity a second chance. Eve is the first person to be told by God to hear about the victory of the future son that she would have, her seed, okay? It says in verse 15, I will put hostility between you, the serpent, and the woman, Eve, and between your seed evil, and her seed. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. And this, a lot of people, they talk about this as the proto-evangelium. That's what the scholars call it, the proto-gospel. It is the gospel in a nutshell, because this is the first time that it's mentioned how God's plan is going to save humanity. And we see the trailer or the preview to what happened on the cross outside Jerusalem. So yes, Eve fell, Eve sinned, Eve was deceived, but she had to deal with the consequences. And she was disciplined, but forgiven. And so she got a new start, and she finished with dignity and loyalty to God. So here's a question. Can you imagine what Eve felt? Now remember, she lived more than, Adam, 930 years. That's a long time. Can you imagine every time she remembered the image of the tree burned in her memory of the tempting tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Can you imagine the knowledge of everything that was never hers? She was fooled by the serpent, and even worse, she was fooled by her own desire. So like Eve, many women today bear the guilt of many past mistakes. Many women carry a heavy burden of guilt because of something they did years ago. The roots of guilt are silently sucking the life out of many women today. And so we see that Eve had to deal with the roots of guilt. Secondly, she had to deal with the roots of shame. Eve had to deal with the roots of shame. One of the things that keeps psychologists and psychiatrists in business, in private practice, is the sense of shame that so many women feel. Now, shame is rooted in dishonor. Dishonor is the mother of shame. The universal pathos of failing to live up to great expectations can be traced all the way back to Eve, facing the physical, moral, and emotional nakedness before the Creator God can be devastating. All the fig leaves in the world are not enough to erase the dishonor and dissolve the shame. I am very sure of this, that Eve cried herself to sleep many a night under the stars and the moon. And Adam just sat there and wondered why. Men and women respond in different ways to different things. Think about it. She was the first woman to dishonor God. Now that sounds too theological. She was the first woman to disappoint the first daddy. Now that is emotionally harsh. So she felt the shame like the weight of a ton of bricks upon her life. It was Eve that messed up the perfect plan of God for humanity. How much shame can a woman carry? But God liberated her from her shame. Yes, she was evicted from Eden, and yes, she was doubly cursed, but she was still the beautiful handiwork of the Creator. She was the most beautiful woman in the world. And God did not take that away from her. Now, if you remember, when Cain sinned, God marked him. And he says, I want everyone to see you and see you for who you are. You are marked. And Cain said, anyone that sees this mark will kill me. And then God said, if anybody kills you, they're going to be 7 times cursed. But with Eve, God did not punish her like that. She was freed from the burden of shame, and she lived for many years with the freedom of God's forgiveness and his acceptance. So when she remembered the tree, when she remembered the fall, when she remembered the shame, she remembered how God smiled on her and said, you are still the beautiful daughter that I created. She was reminded that she was the first daughter of God. And so like Eve, many women look in the mirror of their lives. Have you ever seen this? There's not a single woman that can walk past the mirror and not look at it. I think that comes all the way back from Eve, because every time women look in the mirror of their lives and find shame, they just fold into themselves. And women today, they worry and they fret about what they look like. But it's not because of what they look like, it's because you're ashamed of what you see. In other words, you don't like what you see. The mirror never lies. The shame never dies. The silent crying never stops, because the roots of shame go deep into the lives of many women like Eve. So not only did Eve have to deal with guilt and with shame, but third, Eve had to deal with the roots of subordination. Now, what exactly is subordination? Subordination is submitting to the authority of another. How many of you want to submit to the authority of somebody else telling you what to do? Eve was the first one, we see here, that was seduced by the evil serpent, okay? She listened to the serpent. She followed the instructions of the evil one. And so she encouraged her husband. Now notice that he was there the whole time. He wasn't wandering off. He was watching the whole scene. And she just turns and says, here, honey. And what did he do? He fell. And so she encouraged her husband to follow her lead. And Paul and the Jews in general, they laid the blame for the fall of humanity right at the feet of Eve. They say if the woman had not been there, man would not have fallen. And that's not true at all, because he was there. He was watching the whole thing. As a result, she had to deal with the curses of pain and subordination. The Bible says that God said to the woman, I will intensify your labor pains. You will bear children in anguish. Wow, okay. My wife will never forgive me for the times. She has a story for each one of our kids. The first one is the worst of all. I was watching a game show while she's giving birth. And that, yeah, okay, I'm not even going to go down that road. All right, let's just stop right there. Let's just say that men and women are different, okay? And so she had to deal with the curse of pain, but that wasn't the worst part of the curse. The worst part was the second curse. Your desire will be for your husband. How many women want to make their man proud and happy? I mean, I see this all the time, huh? I see this all the time. Women will do anything for a man when they love them. And that's pretty cool, okay? I have a wife that loves me, and it's like, oh, wow, okay? But what happens when it flips? And the curse was that your desire will be for your husband. You're going to love this guy, but he's going to rule over you. He's going to tell you what to do. he's going to... Now, it's funny because a lot of people interpret that to mean that that's the law of the land. This was a curse, guys. This was not a blessing from God. This was a curse. And a curse is something that you have to get out from. You have to dissolve. You have to get away. And so the curse is that man's going to tell women what to do. Now, anybody that knows anything about abuse in the home, you will see a male figure telling a female figure what to do. And it's never a good thing. And so how much is a woman worth compared to a man? Now, for centuries, we've lived under this lie that in the eyes of God, man is here and woman is here. Now, the degree of separation depends on who's the interpreter, okay? Here's the man, here's the woman, and the man has to be the one that tells the woman what to do because that's our right. No, we forget that it's a curse. And the curse is a strange one, huh? God created male and female in the first account of creation at the same moment, at the same time. And in the second one, he creates her from the rib of man, not to show dominance, but to show that closeness, that affinity. And always, when you look at the man, Adam, he's never telling her what to do. If anything, it's the other way around. From the beginning, women have been telling men what to do. Here, honey, eat. And so, how much male arrogance and chauvinism can a woman take? Now, that's the curse. That's the curse on womanhood. But God, who gave her the status of equality from the very beginning, reinforced through the gospel the liberation. And so Paul notes, Paul himself, he understands in Galatians 3:28, he says, there's no Greek or Jew, no cultural difference. There's no slave or free, no economic difference or social difference. There's no male and female. Since you are all one in Christ Jesus. And so the fall marred, the sin was the one that cursed the woman with that status of subordination. But the forgiveness of God reinstated the equality of woman and man before God. You've heard that at the foot of the cross, the ground is level. At the foot of the cross, we are all the same. And this was proven by the teachings of Jesus. Hey, who was the one that committed adultery? Her, or we need to stone this woman. Stone her, throw a rock. Jesus, here's a rock. And Jesus said, okay, whoever is free from sin, let that man be the first to throw a rock. And he starts writing, and all of a sudden they said, and then he said, honey, there's nobody here to condemn you. What happened to everybody? He goes, they're gone. Well, I don't condemn you. So go and what? And sin no more. So women today suffer many pains as a result of that ancient curse. And many women are beaten down by men who subordinate them in hurtful ways. Many women today suffer thanks to deep roots in the curse of subordination that come to us all the way from Eden's. Now, in conclusion, women today are still carrying the old burdens of Eve. Women are still feeling guilty for a million things where they have failed. Women are still feeling shame for all the millions of unmet expectations in their lives. Women are still feeling the curse of subordination in their relationships with man. Today, many of you women that are listening to me are experiencing the abuse of guilt, of failure as a woman, as a wife, and as a mother. It is no surprise that almost all the women in our society suffer from issues of low self-esteem. And it is not something that they grow into. It comes even when they're little girls. And so we have to teach our little girls to be free from all of this stuff. Many of you are experiencing the abuse of shame, of not living up to the expectations of God. Many women are living up to the expectations of someone else. God, your parents, your husband, or even yourself, and you're not meeting those expectations. And many of you are experiencing the abuse of the subordination to a false concept of manhood that has plagued humanity since the very beginning. So today on Mother's Day, you can experience freedom from all that abuse. Today you can experience the liberation through the seed of Eve, Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, who came to undo at the cross. Jesus undid at the cross everything that fell in the Garden of Eden. Everything that was unleashed in Eden, Jesus undid at the cross. Jesus paid for all your guilt. He suffered all your shame. Jesus acquiesced to the abuse of subordination from those who thought they were better than him, but they were not, that you could be free. So be free from the guilt, from the shame and the abuse. And so I'm going to ask that you bow your head and be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Are you living under the curse of that guilt, that you have failed? Are you living under the shame of the dishonor of some unmet expectation? Are you living under the subordination of someone that is making you his slave? And God is saying, be free, be free. How do I do that? The same way that Eve did, just come clean before God and say, Lord, I bring to you my guilt. I can't explain it, but I need forgiveness. Lord, I bring to you my shame. I can't accept myself, but you have accepted me already. And Lord, I bring to you this subordination that is hurting me. Free me with only the freedom that you can give. I come to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. And so if you